Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for attending today's Physical and Mental Health and Wellbeing for Home Workers webinar. My name is Tristan Rigby. I'm the Commercial Partnerships Manager at Care First, and I'm delighted to be joined by Claire, Sue and Francine from Wellbeing at Work Collaborative. I'll let them do a proper introduction shortly. Just before we do the presentation today, I just wanted to do a bit of housekeeping. So obviously everybody is in listen only mode. However, if you go onto the control panel and under the questions tab, you can type a question in anonymously, and then I will look to read out those questions at the end of today's webinar, or as many as that I can. And you can also email me afterwards in case there's any questions that come up afterwards. So without further ado, I'm going to pass you over to Claire now, who is going to kick things off with how physical mental health is affected for home workers in regards to physical health and exercise.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Tristan, for that introduction. So my name's Claire Callahan, and I'm a physiotherapist by training, and my real specialty is in sport and exercise and musculoskeletal health. So I'm here today really just to talk about, we're in unprecedented times, aren't we, with COVID-19, and so many people, I think it's about 80% of people at one stage, when I was last looking at the stats back in May, were working from home. So it's, most of us have switched, and my role really today is to help you with regards to your physical health at home, and also integrate that with Sue, who will talk about the dietary component, and Francine, who will talk about how we can become more resilient and manage our stress levels with regards to that as well. So really, next slide's fine, Tristan. So really wanted to highlight, first of all, that musculoskeletal problems are a massive issue. And when you look at this is pre-COVID stats, so it could be an even bigger problem now. We just don't know. And there's, some clever people looking at what's happening in COVID-19 on a variety of things, including musculoskeletal health. But according to our stats from the Health and Safety Exec, and based on National Office of Statistics figures for 2018-19, stress and depression and anxiety and musculoskeletal disorders were the main things that caused days off work. And on average, sufferers took off just over 2 weeks off a year. So if you think about that in your workforce, if someone does suffer from, say, back pain or some mental health issues, chances are that on average they will take that time off. And not only is that a huge personal cost to them and their own personal productivity and ability to contribute, but clearly that impacts organisations as well. And within that, it's generally back pain. For many years it's been back pain that's been the greatest cause of musculoskeletal problems within the workplace that cause time off. Okay, next slide. So if we think about, we've skipped, here we go. So if we think about our sitting posture now, and I'd all like you to think about how we're sitting now, it's not easy, is it, to sort of be in a good posture. And it's particularly hard, I think, when we're at home. We might not have our normal chair, we might not have our normal desk. In fact, most of us don't. So it's really important to think about how you're set up at home and how you can mimic the office as best as possible, and mimic what is a more ideal posture, because it's a bit of a no-brainer, isn't it, that when we sit like this and come forward, we're straining all our neck muscles. We're looking at screens, perhaps not at the right height, so really you want to be looking directly at your screen. Your shoulders come forward. It puts a lot of pressure on the lower spine, and certainly can affect the discs and the way that everything functions as well. It also affects our leg muscles. When you're sitting for long periods, our leg muscles sort of get shorter and tighter, so that even for those who are really active when they're not sitting at work, you're going from a really shortened position in your leg and suddenly expecting your body to do these huge explosive movements, and that's what another cause of injury actually. So all in all, it's really important to think about the spinal posture. I'm going to get my little model out now. So obviously you're all seeing mainly the slide, and hopefully you can see my little spine still though. So if we look at the spine, you're looking at these curves that you want to have aligned. So you're looking at this neck curve here, this bit in here comes in slightly, the thoracic curve comes out, and then your lumbar spine, there's a small curve here before you get to the pelvis. So if we look there at how you can support that lower back when in sitting, you know, if you don't have your normal nice chair, perhaps you could get a cushion or something that gives you a bit of a prop up to help you sit up nice and tall at your desk so that you're not in that slumped position. Anything that you can use to give you that little bit of extra stability and strength and control through there. You know, cheating with a little cushion or a lumbar roll is fine. Next slide. So as you can see here, this is from the Chartered Society of Physio. You'll get all these slides to take away, so you don't have to worry about taking all this down now, but it does outline exactly what does constitute a good posture for sitting. So really sitting with your bottom back in the chair, resting your forearms at a 90-degree angle, relaxing the shoulders, making sure your feet are both flat on the floor. So if you want to try this now, now's a good time for us all to do it. So feet flat on the floor, and just adjusting the chair height if you need to. Now that's obviously difficult. I mean, you can see that I'm sitting on a non-adjustable chair, and I don't think I'm alone. So it's finding the best chair in the house really that's going to give you that ability to look directly, and propping your screen up. So it might be that you get a couple of thick, heavy textbooks or cookbooks and you put them under your screen to bring them to the height that you need them. Because whilst, you know, in a fancy office, you might get all the techie stuff from a nice stationery company to do that. We might not all be able to do that right now. So yeah, like literally some thick books just to bring you up so you're looking directly at your screen is useful. And I often find this quite a useful tip as well. Imagine there's something sort of pulling you up almost by the back, you know, for women by the back of a ponytail or by the back of your head, just to bring you up. And you'll automatically find your postural muscles will be well activated when you're doing that. So that's a really useful thing to sort of keep in mind. Next slide. Okay, so if we're now looking at physical activity, what theoretically should we be doing to look after our health? And this guidance comes from the Chief Medical Officer for England and Wales and Northern Ireland and Scotland, and it came out late last year in September 2019. I'm just going to, rather than go through all the nitty-gritty on that, I'm just going to highlight a few of the key things. So theoretically, we should be doing 150 minutes of moderate activity each week, or at least 75 minutes of vigorous activity. So moderate activity is going for a walk or run at a conversational pace, or doing things like gardening, something that's getting your heart rate up when you're moving around, but you can still have a conversation. 75 minutes of the vigorous activity. The vigorous activity is really, you know, you're getting a little bit out of breath. You can do 3 or 4 word answers when you're doing the activity. So I think that's, you know, you could mess around with heart rates, monitors and all the rest of it, but I think for most of us, that's something we can all relate to. The other key thing that hadn't been mentioned in the past, but is becoming increasingly important and recognised, is reducing the sedentary time. So we all know that if you sit at work for 8 hours in a chair, you end up feeling pretty uncomfortable, and that does predispose you to musculoskeletal problems like back pain, neck pain, and so on. So it can be as simple as, you know, when you're on a phone call, for example, standing up when you're on the call, or it might be that you take short breaks. You know, after 30 minutes, there are metabolic changes that happen that mean sitting for long periods, you know, does have cardiovascular problems associated with it. So getting up and just gently moving around, and maybe going for a walk at lunchtime, for example, you know, just think about what suits your life and what's something small that you can do to just minimize that sedentary time. And I'll give you some more hints and tips on that later. Balance is another thing that's come into play more recently in research as well. So doing activities that challenge your balance, obviously it's been pretty limited lately, but I think there's been a bit of an explosion in things like online yoga classes, for example, online exercise classes, but equally, you know, going for a walk on a rocky path, you know, if you've got children, you know, going out in the garden and catching a ball and moving in different directions, those sort of things are challenging your balance and really useful to do as well. And it's that cumulative picture that will help stop you from getting pain and also help you manage it. And strength as well. doing strength a couple of times a week, strength work a couple of times a week is recommended. So that doesn't mean you all have to go out to the gyms, and we can't anyway at the moment, but you know, something small like, you know, you can use tins from the cupboard, you can use your own body weight as a resistance. So, you know, you can do something as simple as tins from the cupboard like this or like this, but equally you could do some press ups against the wall. You know, it can take many different guises. So the next question is, well, why be active in the first place? So yeah, next slide, please, Tristan. Here we go. We all know exercise is good for us, you know, but I think you know, there's lots of reasons on this slide, you know, for children, for adults, and for older adults, with regards to our bone health, our cardiovascular fitness, our cardiovascular well-being, chance of getting cancer, you know, our cognitive function, and chances of falling. But what I think is really important to focus on is how we feel. I think that, you know, how we feel drives a lot of our behavior. And I think if you're out there doing small amounts of activity and gradually building that up and getting outside in the fresh air sometimes, particularly at the moment when we've got the long days, is how we feel that's really going to make us want to exercise and want to be active. And I do think, well, it's not just me thinking it, there's tons of research to back this up, that if you are active, you generally feel better, and not only feeling better in the mind, but you are not going to have many aches and pains in your spine, in your joints, and so on. A lot of people worry about, will physical activity make things worse for me? So, for example, you know, people with arthritis in their legs, in their hips, and their knees, or in their neck, really, you know, have come to me with great concerns about, if I'm active, I'm going to make it worse. But it's about pitching it right. So, pick an activity that your body can cope with, because the research actually shows that if you've got arthritic joints or painful joints and you don't move them at all, the outcome is worse. So you're actually better off to do a little bit often and just introduce that. In terms of intensity, next slide. We have mentioned intensity, and I think we've gone through, you know, the difference between getting that moderate level, which you do want to do a bit of, but big, you know, the more is better. But at the same time, you know, start with what you can cope with and go from there, and do what you enjoy. There's no point, well, there obviously is a point in terms of your fitness and your well-being, but actually choose something you enjoy. So if you don't like running, don't, you know, choose something else. Choose a racket sport, choose walking, choose dance, whatever it is. It's about choosing something that's right for you. So think about what you enjoy and what the people around you enjoy, because other people being on board with this too will help you. Next slide. So, you know, the guidelines say it all. Some is good, more is better. But the good news is, if you look, I think we're all getting very used to exponential curves, and this is another one which I think demonstrates the point nicely, that the small start, the biggest change happens at the very beginning of this process. So if you're not doing much, just doing a little bit will have a great impact. And then obviously the more you do, the better you feel, the less likely you are to have pain and discomfort as well. Next slide. So yeah, lots of us are relatively inactive. I think COVID has just changed the ballgame. Some people are doing a lot more activity, some people are doing less, but there's been a change for all of us, and it just is a really good time for us to reflect and reevaluate. And certainly with regard to our workplace well-being, there's a lot of benefits for being active too. I'll just get you to next slide. So in terms of what benefit does this have to the workplace? Well, if you're more active, your cognitive function is better. So you know, the temptation often is to sit and keep working, but actually sometimes taking that short break will have cognitive benefits, and it's common sense, but there's you know, a lot of research that's been done around this by economic groups and so on, and you know, the mental health charity have come up with, you know, their 5 pillars of well-being, which are have been adopted by the New Economics Foundation and other groups internationally. So being active, giving, taking notice, connecting with other people, and keeping on learning, they're the 5 pillars that they reflect on. And clearly we're talking about the being active being one, which not only is good for your mental well-being, but actually has that ongoing benefit for cognitive function and being engaged in your work as well. Final slides. So yeah, memory, cognition, productivity, and it just provides that sense of well-being, and you know, that's a proven fact. Next slide. These stretches can be downloaded from the Chartered Society of Physiotherapy. Again, they will appear in your slides that Tristan will send you, but also I can send him a link which he can then pass on to you, where you can download them and put them on your desktop. We're not going to go through them now. Sometimes, you know, we do deep dives in other workshops, and we do go through this in far more detail and do all the chest stretches and so on, and demonstrate. You know, so, but do take a look at some of these stretches, because they're, you know, sometimes you can't get out of your desk, but doing a simple chest stretch or standing, you know, leaning forward with your leg out just changes your position, and it is good for you. So final slide. So what I'd really love you to do is think about, with regards to your work and physical activity, what's one small thing you could do differently? Be it, you know, slotting exercise in one more day of the week, or trying some of the stretches, or looking at your desk posture. Just think of one thing from this talk that you could do that's going to help you feel better and help you be more engaged in your work and more productive. And just think about how you're going to fit this into your working day if it regards physical activity as well. And that's it, really. Look forward to your questions at the end.
Thanks, Claire. Really appreciate that. We're now moving over to Subek, who's going to look at the nutrition for home workers as part of today's webinar.
Thanks, Tristan, and thanks, Claire. And hi, everybody. Yes, I'm Sue, and I'm a registered dietitian specialising in workplace health. And there's so much I could say about food and fluid and home working. But what I've done is I've picked 3 of the top things from our webinars we do as Wellbeing at Work Collaborative that I hope you might find useful. So does this picture look like your new norm? Extra things you're doing: stress snacking, caffeine overload, new routine of your meals, changes in shopping? Well, let's move on to the next slide, please, Tristan. So as I say, I've picked 3 questions which I think might be quite useful to go through. I certainly hope so. The thing I'm getting asked from my workplace clients, first of all, is, can nutrition help us stay well? What's the links with immunity? So I'll cover that. Linking on from what Claire was saying about how your posture and exercise affect your productivity and mood, I'll cover the role of diet in that. And thirdly, can we save time and money eating healthily? Just what sorts of things can we do at home if we're working there to do that? So next slide, please. So the first one is the immunity and staying well, which is on all our minds at the moment, isn't it? Next slide. The immune system can't be boosted with nutrition. We don't want it to be boosted, really. We don't want an overactive immune system. But the key thing is it can actually be supported. It's really complicated. I get really confused when I look at the physiology of the immune system. There's so many different cells all interacting with the organs. But the key to it is we can support our immune system with a range of different nutrients. And that includes things like vitamin C, vitamin D, the B vitamins, and all the minerals. But the best way to get that, funny enough, is not necessarily through a supplement. It's about a variety of different foods. The nutrients are in the correct dose in food, and the good thing about them is they're in conjunction with each other, so you get them in the sort of mix that you need for good immunity. So supplements are fine, but the best way to do it is actually through food. So I'll just have a quick reminder for you of the key food groups that give that variety. So next slide, please. You're probably familiar with that Eat Well guide, but that shows the 4 key food groups that we need, and I'll take a quick look at each. Next slide, please. The first one, not surprisingly, is the fruit and veg. because they contain all the nutrients I was talking about that support the immune system. And that picture shows a few key points. The first one is the rainbow, is that we need a variety of different fruit and veg, because the colours are often the protective nutrients. So that idea of eating a rainbow is quite good. You don't want all your fruit and veg to be red or to be blue or to be green. You want a bit of a variety. But the good news is that loads of different things count. So frozen and canned, they've still got the colours, haven't they? So they actually count towards your 5 a day as well. So frozen, canned, fresh, dried, and even juice. And the thing I get asked so much about is what's the portion? And really, it's not too important to get too fixated about that. I would say the key thing is it's roughly what fits in the palm of your hand. And if you've got children, they've got smaller hands, haven't they? So their portions are generally smaller, but we all need that variety of different types and colours. Next slide, please. The next group is the carbohydrates. And these get a bad press, but that's completely unwarranted, I think. Ideally, we should be choosing the whole grain type, because they've got a higher proportion of those nutrients that we need for immunity. But again, a mix of different types, and they're really important in terms of fueling the brain and also mood, as well as supporting immunity. So making sure we have some foods from that group, ideally whole grain ones. Next slide. Those two groups, the fruit and veg and the whole grains, are also really rich in fibre. And I put this slide in because there's a lot of interest at the moment around how fibre can feed the good bacteria in our gut, which can actually do two things. It can support our immunity, because actually most of our immune cells live in the gut. That always surprises people. So clearly gut health is important at this time. But there's also a really clear link now between the gut and the brain. It's called the gut-brain axis. And there's a lot of evidence now that normally would go into more in our webinars, but between the connection between how healthy our gut is and how we feel in terms of our concentration and mood. And it seems that it's a wide diversity of plant foods that matters for both of those, that gut health and that mental health. And I just thought I'd put a statistic on there that might interest some of you, is that it's about £3 billion per day is lost through sick days just related to gut health. So clearly that idea of building a healthy gut is important. And we actually have in our Wellbeing at Work collaborative a whole 1-hour workshop just on gut health involving all three of us, because we think it is so important. So next slide, please. The final two groups I'll mention to make sure we have that variety are the dairy and alternatives. So that might be plant milks if you don't eat dairy, and then the protein foods. But it doesn't have to be animal protein. Things like beans, nuts, seeds, again, brilliant source of nutrients, including protein. So those four groups are really important to get if we're looking at boosting immunity, or sorry, supporting immunity. Next slide, please. And I'll just mention one key nutrient here, because that was on the news today. I don't know if anybody saw the headlines today. Two big organisations, Public Health England and the Scientific Committee on Advisory on Nutrition, have looked at this role of vitamin D, especially in COVID-19. So normally we make vitamin D from the effect of UVB, sun on our skin, but we only do it in the summer, and we only do it when we're outside. We can't do it through glass, or we can't do it through sunscreen, in fact. So it's not that easy at the moment for some of us to make our vitamin D. And in fact, 1 in 4 UK adults is low. It's got roles in bone health and, really interestingly, in mental health. There are vitamin D receptors in the brain. So clearly it's got a role in bone health and mental health, but also in immunity. Now, at the moment, it doesn't necessarily show that it's specifically linked to COVID-19, but there does seem to be a key role in vitamin D supporting the immune system. So I would say, great idea at the moment, if you're not getting out as much as normal, is to take a daily vitamin D supplement. It's very hard to get from diet. 10 micrograms, you can buy it from the chemist or the supermarket. It's less for children, but I'll give you a link at the end if you're looking at that. And the key to it is take it with a meal, because it's actually a fat-soluble vitamin, so we absorb it a lot better if we have it with one of our main meals. So that's the exception to the rule that food are better than supplements, really. Okay, so next slide, please. Oh, we're on that one. Influencing mood and productivity. So I'll move on to the next slide, please, Tristan. So what actually affects our mood and productivity? Now, Claire's touched a lot on that about how our activity levels, but also think about, in conjunction with that, your hydration, because sometimes we forget to drink, don't we, especially if it's hot. But the evidence now is that dehydration affects mood, fatigue, and impairs our concentration and work performance. And we're sometimes not even aware of that. And a really good thing to use is one of these P charts. I don't know if you've seen these, but you should be one of the top 3. One of the doctors I work with says your P should be the colour of champagne, which I always think is a bit fancy. So I prefer to use the idea of pale straw colour. But one of those top 3 is your ideal. So it's worth checking if you're well hydrated. Next slide, please. So how much and what? Well, that message of 6 to 8 a day is really fine. It's good in that when it's hotter, you might need a bit more, but 6 to 8 a day is a really good ballpark figure. That's glasses or mugs. And look at all the different things that count. Water, tea counts, herb tea, coffee, milk, low-calorie diet drinks, fruit juice. Those all count towards it. And the thing I get asked most about is coffee. And yeah, coffee is still a net hydrator. And actually, it can boost alertness and mood. But if you have too much, it has the opposite effect, including increasing anxiety, irritability, and sleep disturbances. All the things that we're a bit worried about during this time of lockdown. So around about 4 to 5 cups of regular coffee a day has been shown to be a moderate amount of caffeine. Don't forget, if you're drinking those giant takeaway coffees, or they've got 2 shots of espresso in them, it's going to be more, it's going to be fewer per day. But around about 4 to 5 cups of regular coffee is going to have a benefit in terms of hydration, concentration. Next slide, please. And I use things to remind me to drink. I have a water bottle or a flask on my desk. I take regular breaks. So Claire's exercise or activity breaks could be linked in with a drink. And sometimes I use an app on my phone just to remind me that it's time to take a drink. So any sort of electronic alarm will work fine. Next slide, please. And then the other thing is embracing breakfast. There's so much research now that shows that breakfast eaters deal better with stress, have better concentration. It doesn't have to be first thing, but within a couple of hours of waking, you can refuel your brain to actually concentrate. And most of this research has been done on children in school, but a lot has been done in the workplace now. So having something to eat is a great one. Next slide, please. And routine and regular structure. I've struggled a bit with this, but I think I've got on top of it now. But keeping a routine in sleep, eating, working still matters. But maybe now you can tailor it a little bit more to your peak productivity if you're a morning person or an evening person. The problem is we don't want to be moving around, changing our sleep, eat and work patterns too much. Because we know that shift work, where you're doing different shifts of different weeks, increases the risk of obesity, heart disease, and type 2 diabetes. So it's fine to match your body clock, but try and keep some regular routine and structure. Next slide, please. And as I said, refreshment breaks, tying in with what Claire said about activity. chance to refuel your brain as well as your body. How about a coffee break with colleagues online somehow, where you're moving around but still taking a break? And then watching out for the triggers to overeating. I've been asked loads about that, and I don't know if you can see my little black box at the bottom. Breakfast, post-breakfast snack, lunch, almost lunch, second lunch, post-dinner. So making sure we're not overeating too much during this time, but certainly regular refreshment breaks. Next slide, please. Saving time and money. I'll do this very briefly. Next slide, please. It doesn't have to be expensive to eat healthily. It depends if you've got time to do it or the inclination, but loads of the supermarket healthy ready meals now can save you effort. So don't beat yourself up if you're not cooking every meal from scratch. I've got my little copy of a label there, a food label. So if you're looking for the healthy ones, you want more greens than reds and ambers. Sometimes I add extra vegetables to those if I can't be bothered to cook a whole meal, but I want to have something healthy. Home cooking, we've got some great recipes from Francine that we'll share with you. If you're on your own, can you share a meal online? Can you both cook a meal and eat it together so that you're actually having a meal time? So you're doing it over Zoom or one of the other platforms. Don't forget convenient plant-based proteins. I mentioned they were just as nutritious. And then saving money on special offers, economy ranges from supermarket's own brand. And then fruit and veg in season or canned and frozen, all brilliant in terms of saving you money. Next slide, please. And food waste, that will save us loads of money. I don't know if this surprises you, but the average person wastes £220 a year in food. The average family, 770. And it's mostly fruit, vegetables, bread, potatoes, and chicken that we waste. We don't waste much chocolate for some reason, but certainly all those nutritious foods. So what can we do about food waste? Next slide, please. Key things. Love Food, Hate Waste. If you want to go to that website, we'll have loads. But planning when we shop. So most of us have got better at that, haven't we, since we're only going to the supermarket occasionally. Making a list and planning. Using your leftovers. That saves on its own a huge amount of money per year. And then understanding storage. So best before is a guideline. It might be okay after that, but use by is a deadline. That's the one where the food isn't safe to eat after that. So best before, not such a crucial one. Next slide, please. So my final slide, just for more information about any of the things I've talked about, we've got this free portal with free to download food fact sheets from the British Dietetic Association, and those cover all the things I've said today and more, and we'll send you this link at the end. So that's me, but at the end I'll be here to answer any questions you have. So back to Tristan, who's going to go over to Francine.
Fantastic, thanks so much, Sue. That was really interesting. I'll now pass you to Francine, who's going to be talking more about building resilience and managing stress and mindfulness on this subject.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Tristan. My name's Francine Russell, and I'm a coach, a mindfulness practitioner and trainer. And it's my intention in the last piece of this session to talk you briefly through mindfulness, because it is a massive subject. So an introduction to mindfulness, cover the science, and also let you have a go at mindfulness. So I hope you're up for a little bit of a practice and leave you with a takeaway of something that you can integrate into your life that will contribute to your wellness. So just to say on these points, you do not have to be an experienced meditator to practice mindfulness. You really don't have to be sitting in a lotus position in a room and chanting at all. Just be yourself, and you can't get it wrong either. What we say in mindfulness, it's a practice, it's not a perfect. Next slide, please. So as I said, you don't have to look like this. You can if you like, but we can sit and practice wherever. I like to call it, for those that remember the old days of the adverts, the martini effect. Anytime, any place, anywhere. You can do it anywhere at all. So really, there are two types of mindfulness in my mind, and in my training and teaching. There's the mindfulness where we do a guided sit, but there's also mindfulness in daily activity, and you can integrate it into your life. A lot of people that I coach particularly always say, I don't have time to fit this into my daily life. And they can be slightly skeptical, which I have to say I was many years ago. During COVID, things have changed a lot and people are bringing this into their life in however small or bigger way. And when we do the practice, I'll guide you through and you'll see that in a short amount of time, hopefully there can be a change in the way that we feel. So next slide, please. So forming a definition, the word is used a lot now. There are apps, Calm, Headspace, Insight Timer. It's become quite a general term, but I just wonder if people know what it really means and also the benefits that you might be aware of. Next slide, please. So John Kabat-Zinn did a lot of work. He's an American and a medical practitioner, and he set up something called the Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction course. It's an 8-week course, and in the 70s, he worked a lot with patients who had chronic illness, particularly pain. And I particularly like this quote because what it actually means is what mindfulness is actually setting an intention to be in the present moment on purpose and non-judgmentally. Now, breaking that down, what it means to me, and in a nutshell, easy to grasp, I hope, is that you're coming out of autopilot. So if you think about all the things that we do without even thinking, dare I say mindlessly. So we eat, we walk, we cook, brush our hair, wash our hair. All of that is done on autopilot, and all of those things can actually be done mindfully if you set an intention. So what I'm saying about mindfulness is actually it's paying attention and noticing, but it's also about being here both mentally and physically, which is not an easy thing and it's not an overnight job, but with practice one can train the brain towards that. Next slide, please. So the brain, the neuroscience is massive. It's a very interesting subject, and if anyone on the call is interested, I would say have a look at the research. There's a lot of research. The leads on research right now are Bangor University and Oxford, and they have done loads of evidence-based trials, and particularly even going back to John Kabat-Zinn, who looked at people who had done the mindfulness-based stress reduction course. After 8 weeks, people had a brain scan and they actually saw the brain change. Now, I'll come on to that in a moment, but what I would say this picture defines for me is it's about flexing the muscle. It's a bit like mindfulness is your exercise for the brain. And the more you do it, the more benefit there is around it. Next slide, please. So as I said, there can be changes in the brain structure, and the optimum time recently was 20 minutes per day, and over an 8-week period we could see the old part of the brain, the amygdala, the reptilian part of the brain, actually begins to shrink. That's the area that is the fight, flight or freeze that deals with stress, and the neurofrontal cortex became more apparent and stronger, and that's the area where we deal with clarity, concentration and decision making. So the scale does correlate, as I said, but you can start small. You can even do a mindful minute. Generally, I would say start small and don't set yourself up to fail, set yourself up to succeed. And there's lots of things we can do with that. Next slide, please. I wanted to bring this in. This is really key during COVID and has come up a lot with clients, both in mindfulness and coaching. I pick up endurance and resilience. What is really the difference? When we're in times of impermanence and uncertainty, the word endurance comes to mind. That's when we really white knuckle something, we really push on through, and we often hold our breath. Now, resilience is something that we really want to build on, and the practice of mindfulness really builds on having a resilient mindset. So what that is less reactivity and more responsiveness and dealing with things in the moment, but actually managing your emotions better when you deal with them. So basically adapting to change in the moment. And this again is something that we build on through a practice, but I would say that I have observed just in this short time, people who are practicing are generally finding little benefits, and it's a slow process, but it is, it does correlate to how much you do. So next slide, please. Just some of the benefits. I won't go into them in great detail, but you can see if I pick up on calmness and presence, those are two that we can look at that can have almost an immediate reaction after doing something just as simple as a breathing exercise, which is what we're going to do in a moment. Next slide, please. And building into our daily lives, these are just some of the examples, but I picked the top one because we're all washing our hands. So typically, instead of singing happy birthday, are we still even doing that? I don't know. What I would say to set intention to mindfully wash your hands is just to notice, as you say, well, you know, turning the water on, feeling the temperature of the water, setting an intention to go from over there to over here, to be present in what you're actually doing. So something like washing your hands, you would feel the soap, you might smell the soap, you might feel the cold or warm water. Well, obviously it should be warm when we're washing our hands. And just noticing that practice, and that can be a 20 or 30-second practice of mindfulness, which does all accumulate towards building a resilient mind. I mean, with the practice of sitting, doing the meditation and integrating into our lives, that's the best option if you can. But often people say, I just don't have time for all this. So I try to impress upon them that we can also do it in our daily lives too. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm hoping that you'll all be up for a quick practice. I say quick because I know we haven't got a lot of time. We can still do things quickly, but mindfully. If I can invite you to just close your eyes or lower your gaze, I'm going to guide you through just a short mindfulness of breath practice and see how you go. Okay, so if you're sitting in your chair or wherever you're sitting on a sofa, I'm not sure, I want you just to close your eyes or lower your gaze and just notice how you're feeling at the moment. And as you're doing that, I just want you to pay attention to your breath as you breathe in through the nose and out through the nose or mouth. Now, the breath is your anchor in mindfulness, so just pay attention and just take a couple of long, luxurious deep breaths in and out. And just ask yourself how you're feeling at the moment. You might be skeptical about what's happening next. I just invite you to just notice how you're feeling in your body and just relax and be yourself, settled, still and steady, just arriving in the moment. Just allowing the breath to breathe itself. And if your mind wanders, that's what minds do. So don't give yourself a hard time. You can label your thoughts thinking. Just come back to the anchor, which is your breath. And now just expanding your awareness to your body. I just want you to notice how your feet feel on the floor. How your back feels supported in the chair. You may want to notice how your hands feel. It might be in your lap or by your side. And just notice what you notice, but with your eyes either lowered or closed, and just gently breathing. And as you breathe in, you might notice the air going into your lungs, and you might notice the rise and fall of your chest or your abdomen. And just go with that slowly, just noticing how your body feels. Again, if you hear any noises that are coming from anywhere, just note them. Don't get caught up in the story of sounds, but come back to your breathing, come back to your breath. Breath is the anchor. Now I'm just going to invite you to pay a little bit more attention to your breath, and we're going to do some counting of breathing. So if I just invite you, if you breathe in through the nose and out through the mouth or nose, and count that as 1. And then again in through the nose, out through the nose or mouth, and count as 2. Just continue doing that until you get to 10, and then just go back to normal breathing. And as you're doing so, just notice how your body feels. Just may notice as you breathe how the lungs become smaller as you exhale and leaves the body. And now just coming towards the end of this practice, I want you just to notice how you feel now compared to how it was when we started. You might want to move your shoulders a bit, put your ear right to right, left to left, just to stretch out a bit. You've been sitting at the screen for some time. And I just invite you to think about your intention of taking this next. So what I mean by that is you've created a space of calm for yourself. So how are you going to take that in the next part of your day? Let's take a moment to think about that. And when you're ready, open your eyes. So that was a very short practice. That was just over 6 minutes. And what I impress upon people is to try a sit or try a practice that I'm just going to guide you through very briefly now, which is the takeaway that I want to give you. Breathing is our absolute anchor and our key in mindfulness. And if you have any problem sleeping, or you've got a difficult phone call or meeting coming ahead, or something you feel anxious about, we call it the 3-4-5, and it's very easy to do and easy to remember. It was introduced by somebody called Dr. Andrew Weil for patients that were suffering with anxiety. And the idea is to breathe in for 3, hold for 4, and breathe out for 5. I'm not suggesting we do that right now, but I think you can take that away with you and try it. And some people actually, just like Sue was saying about having the alarm on her phone for what she was talking about, I think it was for hydration. Some people I know have their alarm on and actually have a check-in throughout the day and just do a 3, 4, and 5, just to downregulate, just to come back into the moment and just to take a space for you. So next slide, please, Tristan. So that's just a little bit on mindfulness. Just to say, we are the Wellbeing at Work Collaborative, and this is our address, our web address, which I think is going to be sent to you. And these are some of the other sessions that we offer. And we do sessions exactly like this for staff as well. And if you're interested in any of what we do, we'd love to hear from you. And thank you very much for asking us, Tristan.
Thank you very much, Francine. That was fantastic. I'll certainly be using that 3-4-5 technique for an important call or meeting that I have going forward. Just a reminder before we go into the questions, just a reminder that Care First is there to support whatever the issue may be. We're there 24/7 to provide professional counselling, information and advice, whatever your concern may be. When you call up, you go straight through to a BHP accredited counsellor who can support you straight away in the moment. You also have access to the Citizens Advice trained information specialists who are available on the line from 8 till 8 Monday to Friday by pressing option 1. You can also engage with a counsellor online via our chat room facility on our lifestyle site. Everyone will have their own unique username and password depending on what organisation you work at, and some of you might have a different phone number, so I haven't listed the phone number just in case it isn't your number for your associated organisation. So if you've got any questions, get in contact with your HR team who will be able to pass you those particular details. And if anybody's got any questions about the Care First service at all, and again, if there's anything that you'd like me to pass over to Claire, Sue and Francine that we don't get through today, please email myself at tristan.rigby@care-first.co.uk and I'll pass your questions on. Fantastic. So I'm just going to have a quick look at the questions now. Just going to make the screen a bit bigger so I can look at each of these questions. I think they're going to be in obvious order of when the sessions were done. So if I ask the questions associated with Claire first, and what you were talking about in regards to physical and health and exercise on this subject, that would be great. So when working from home, are employees or employees expected to consider display screen assessments, and are employers required to provide suitable seating?
I think this is an interesting topic that hasn't been, I'm not aware of any changes in regulation, first of all, and I've looked on the health and safety exec and also looked at the Charter Society of Physio. I haven't been made aware of any changes, but I think the existing obligations that you would have would still apply in terms of just looking after the well-being of the employees overall. If you had any more specific questions on that, I would contact the health and safety executive just to check. But from my understanding, that hasn't changed. What I think you should do, any responsible employer would do is just make sure that people are set up as best they can be, hence access to the services provided by groups like Care First, but also ourselves as well. Also the human resources governing bodies might also have some extra information on any legislative changes that have happened there as well, but I think I'm not aware of any at this stage.
No, that's a very good point, Claire, that I should have touched on. Actually, the Citizens Advice Information Specialists have access to a lot of those resources that you mentioned. So again, please give us a call for those types of practical queries that people may have about COVID as well. Thanks for that question. We've got another one here, I think more associated with you, Claire. Do you have any advice for anybody that's working with a chronic illness or condition?
Yeah, I mean, first, I think for anybody who's got any chronic condition, I think the most important thing is to know yourself, what your, forewarned is forearmed, really. So know your condition, be in contact with medical and other healthcare professionals about that condition, and don't, at a time like this, it's easy to feel quite isolated, I think, when you've got medical issues. So do communicate with them, do get access the support that is there in the NHS, but also from organisations like Care First and ourselves. In terms of it, that is a broad question. It really depends on what the problem is. So, for example, I'm going to speak using it as a musculoskeletal example. So, for example, if you've got a musculoskeletal condition, at the moment, a lot of physiotherapists are working virtually as opposed to face-to-face. So, certainly you could access things with regards to that. I know the NHS resources are limited, but they are there, and if it fits in their domain, you know, see them. The other thing I think is to, when working from home, you know, you have got, you know, talk to your employer as well about the flexibility that you may have to take regular breaks or work in a way that is conducive to managing your healthcare condition. So, for example, if it's a thing that's, you know, sitting for long periods, for example, exacerbates the condition, or if you know, if you need to eat more regularly, or things like that, you know, talk to your employer. I think at the moment it's a good opportunity to have a chat about flexibility and change. So I mean, that's a broad question and just a brief answer, I'm afraid. Yeah.
No, that's appreciated. Thanks, Claire. Just to let you know, we've had some amazing feedback. Thank you so much for all your positive comments, and a lot of people have said it's going to make a real big difference to how they think about things differently. So no, thank you very much for those comments. I've got a question here for Sue in regards to vitamin D. Somebody said that they take a spray daily, but although you mentioned we can't get this from food, he was under the impression that mushrooms can provide it. If so, how much do they provide?
It's only mushrooms that have been left out in the sun. So they will make vitamin D for you if you leave them out for about 30 minutes with the packaging off in the sun. The problem is most of us don't eat mushrooms every day, and we need a daily dose of vitamin D. So mushrooms will, if they're exposed to the sunlight. So some of the supermarkets now sell vitamin D enriched mushrooms, which means they've left them out in the sun for you, or you can leave your own out there. But I'm not sure that I would rely on that as my main source of vitamin D. There's no harm in taking your 10 micrograms and having some of the mushrooms as well. Vitamin D supplement is such a cheap thing to buy from supermarket or chemist, unless of course you do eat mushrooms every day.
No, thanks for that, Sue. Again, we're getting lots of comments about wanting to know more about other sessions that you do. So after today's session, I will pass all of Claire, Sue and Francine's information to everyone, so you can contact them directly. And I'll also share the slides. So just trying to look through the other questions here. Oh, amazing feedback, thank you. How can I download the presentation? So in terms of the recording of the presentation, you can access it using the same link as you used to register for today. It's usually available from about an hour afterwards. If you just allow an hour for us to load up, you'll be able to share the session and pass it through to the organisation, and also view it again if you'd like to. Okay, lots and lots of good comments. About the presentation, people saying that they'd love to share the presentation, so that's good. Love to be able to share the breathing technique. Well, because it's recorded, that's going to be easy to do, so that's fantastic. I have a question for Sue here. I'm missing out nutritionally by using, am I missing out nutritionally if I'm using dairy-free alternatives?
No, they're great these days. You mean things like soya and nut milks? Those are all now fortified with usually with calcium, vitamin D and B12, and even some of them with iodine. So look for one that's fortified with those nutrients, and that will be equivalent to dairy. I would just say that the organic soya milk isn't fortified. So that won't replace necessarily the calcium and vitamin D, but the almond milks, coconut milk, that are intended as a dairy supplement, not your canned coconut milk. Soya, coconut, almonds, hazelnut, those are all excellent now. Supermarket own brand or some of the big brands.
Fantastic. Another one for you, Sue. My 11-year-old son won't eat any veg. How can I sneak it into his food?
Oh, I know that with my stepdaughter. It's probably not a good idea to sneak it in, just because they might not trust you so much afterwards. but doing things like when you make a bolognese sauce, adding vegetables to that. So to foods they like pasta sauces or soups, you can add vegetables to that. And again, remember that there's no one specific veg it has to be. So it doesn't have to be Brussels sprouts. You could look for another green vegetable to get the nutrients. They might like broccoli, for example. So trying lots of different ones, not pressurizing to have one they really don't like. And then maybe as one of your 5 a day, something like a smoothie that's got some fruit and veg in it.
Mm.
No, that's really useful advice. Lots of people loving the mindfulness exercise, Francine. One person saying that they felt like they were melting.
Oh.
No, very good. They've asked, is there an app you'd recommend for mindfulness? I know there's one that Care First uses that we're launching at the moment. It's called My Possible Self, and it's an NHS approved app with a lot of mindfulness techniques and other use of resources and techniques you can use to sort of take control of that difficult time. But I didn't know, Francine, if there was any other mindfulness apps that you would recommend.
I would say you can get them for nothing as well. Insight Time is a really good one. It's great. They've got from 1 minute upwards. So you can actually just tap in 1 minute mindfulness and you'll get a breathing exercise come up. Or Calm is another one. But the one I recommend definitely is Insight Timer. It's really, really easy to use.
Fantastic. Thank you. Questions are coming thick and fast now. Is it true that vitamin D is only absorbed through the arms?
No, any skin that's exposed to the UVB will make vitamin D. So face, legs, arms, whatever. It's in the top layers of the skin that it's actually made. So any of those. But as I said, you do have to be out for at least 10 minutes when the sun's in the brightest part of the day without sunscreen. So it's a tricky balance between not burning and getting your vitamin D. I personally take a vitamin D supplement because then I can put sunscreen on when I go out in the sun. But no, it's any part of your skin that's exposed.
Fantastic, thank you. I've got a comment here. I've recently been having problems just since working from home with pain in the top of my left leg. Been trying to do some exercise and gardening after sitting at my computer each day, but then suddenly my leg has been aching, giving way. Is it best just to rest it or stretch and keep moving it?
I think you're best to get a diagnosis on it, actually, with something like that. I think, you know, the more you know about what's going on, then you can manage it properly. Because if it's to do with sitting, there's so many things that could be. And one of them is it actually could be referred from the spine if it's associated with sitting as well. So you'd want to exclude that. So my advice would be to speak preferably to a physio, a first contact physio who's working, you know, ideally get it on the NHS. The reality is you're probably not going to at this stage. So you can access that privately, or you could speak to your GP as well, and they can do virtual or in-person consults as well. I'd get keep moving, definitely keep moving, and be guided by pain. If something hurts, then you back off. Yeah, but keep moving, take those little breaks, go and get it diagnosed and sorted.
Fantastic. A couple of questions, Francine here. I suffer with asthma and allergies, making breathing focusing awkward. Should I preserve on breath focus or find an alternative anchor?
What you can sometimes do with that is you focus on a part of your body rather than your breath. So in other words, you could focus on your chest as you're breathing or your belly, and actually just focus on that rather than paying attention to your breath, because some people do find that quite hard. So I would say choose the chest or the belly and just notice it rising and falling as you're breathing rather than focusing on that as your anchor. That does seem to work quite well for people.
Thank you. This is one that actually I do. Someone said I often go to sleep with the TV on to clear my mind. Is this a bad thing to do?
The thing about mindfulness, it's not about clearing your mind, actually. Interestingly, it's about noticing what's going in your mind and managing it. So we don't talk about zoning out, we talk about zoning in. If that works for you, I'm not going to say it's a bad thing. But I would say going to sleep with something like maybe some, if people like that, is a kind of, not even a guided meditation, maybe just some gentle breathing or music. But yes, it's really, we don't clear our mind, but at night we probably should try and relax our mind, yes.
Very much. And there's lots of questions, so I'm just going to ask one more, if that's okay. And it's one for Claire. Any recommendations on laptop usage for posture?
Can you repeat that? Sorry. Any recommendations on?
Any recommendations on laptop usage for posture? I know you touched on it in the session, and
Okay.
maybe you should, yeah.
If you think back to the slide that I had, where we had a picture of that man, and he's sitting there, and he's at his laptop or his PC, and he's looking straight on. So I'm doing this right now. I've got my laptop propped up on a really thick books. So yeah, slide number 4, I think it is, with the blue man, not him, not the baddie man. Not the crowd. Yeah, this is our perfect posture man. So I do think, you have to improvise with a laptop. So, so often, and I mean, we're all guilty of this, sitting on the couch with the laptop on our lap. If you must do that, then get a pillow or cushion or something that brings it up a bit higher, and put a cushion in your back and do it that way. But obviously the preferable way is to elevate it, so that you should be looking at about the top third directly of the screen. So you should be aligned with that top third of the screen. If I'm being really picky, actually, the man in the screen in the slide, he should be, I would put his screen up a tiny bit, not to diss the Charter Society of Physiographics people, but I really think, you want to be looking straight on. And the other thing is, look at your screen brightness as well, because how bright that screen is can affect our levels of stimulation as well. If you're struggling, make it a bit brighter. If you're getting headaches, you might find that the screen brightness is too much and you want to dull it down a bit. So that's another tip that I would say about laptop use. And just not having it too far away from you, because that, if it's too far away, then you're having to overreach, and that will put pressure on your nerves and your muscles. So keep things fairly close to you so you're working in that zone. So yeah, hopefully that.
Thanks so much, Claire. Yeah. That's great. And as I said before, any further questions, please direct them to myself, which, just again as a reminder, is tristan.rigby@care-first.co.uk. If anybody didn't get the notes earlier, you can share the recording of today's session just by sharing the link that you would have used to register for today's session. So I found that so incredibly useful. Thank you very much, Claire, Sue and Francine. I'll definitely be going away and talking about that with a lot of our clients, certainly, and trying to incorporate it in some webinars that we do in the future as well. So as I say, I'll pass on all the comments and information and feedback that's been given. I'll also pass on your contact details to everybody that's attended, so they can contact you directly as well if they want any information about that you also provide. Yeah. But that's it for me. Do any of you three want to add anything before we leave today?
Just feel free to contact us. Yeah.
And thanks for listening and watching.
Yeah. And also think about if we can make things fairly bespoke for people's workplaces as well. So if there's a particular need in a certain workplace, for example, if stress and resilience is something that they want to really focus on, we can adapt our presentations to really fit the needs of individual firms and groups. So hopefully that's something that will be, we've found that's been really of interest in the past to managers. So hopefully that would help. Yeah.
Thank you very much, and thanks again for joining us today in today's webinar. Thank you, and take care.
Thanks, Tristan. Take care. Bye.
Thanks for hosting. Bye-bye.